How am I going to start today's show? Well, it's a review of the new Bowers & Wilkins 606 S3 stand mount speaker. It's part of the new 600 series, which goes all the way back to the 90s, I think the mid 90s. And yeah, it just keeps going and going because, hey, it's a very popular line. So I'm doing the 606 S3, but there's also a 607, that's a smaller stand mount speaker, S3. And then there's the Tower, the 603 S3, and also a center channel speaker, the HTM6 S3. Before we get into the 606 S3, I just want to tell you about my personal history with this brand, which really started with the DM6. This was in the late 1970s at a store called Electronic Workshop. Now, I didn't work there. I just went in to hear this speaker that I heard so much about. And the salesman, his name was Alan, as a matter of fact, we're still friends. And anyway, I remember being really knocked out by the DM6 for its clarity and its coherence and its speed and resolution of detail. And I remember, I remember the music I was playing was, this would actually set the time. It was Brian Eno's Before and After Science. This is on vinyl, obviously, since it's the 70s, right? I knew this recording really well, and I was floored by what I heard. And over the years, I've heard many, many more B&Ws and reviewed definitely my share of B&Ws. So that's where it all started. So as for this one, the 606 S3, well, it has an all-new tweeter. Now, the previous generation, the S2 series, had aluminum tweeters. The S3 series has a new titanium tweeter, two-piece dome. I don't know what that means, but it is titanium. And it also has a new mounting plate, which is said to improve dispersion, a new grill that's more open, so more sound gets through, and presumably there's less reflection off the grill, and also a longer tube that's mounted behind the tweeter that absorbs the back wave coming off of the diaphragm of the tweeter. So that's a whole new ball game. The woofer, though, is more like last year's model. It's a 6.5-inch continuum mid woofer, but it also has a new motor assembly. So that's what's new there. The crossover network has been updated, they say, but I don't know exactly how or what the details of that are. I did note, though, by the way, that the tweeter and the mid woofer are now closer together, so they actually, blend better than they did in the previous generation, the S2. The 600 series is available in 3 finishes: black, white, and light oak. I have the light oak. It is a vinyl wrap finish, so there's no real oak in there, but it looks really nice. Now, around back, looking at the back of the 606 S3, you'll see a large bass port. Now, some people always seem to want their bass ports in the front. This one is in the back. And by the way, there have been 600 series speakers that had their bass ports in the front. See, the engineers aren't really hung up on this front-back thing. But anyway, if you're weird about rear bass ports, it does come with a foam plug, so you can plug the port, and therefore, whatever your port anxiety problems are, they will be taken care of. I listened to it both ways. I, of course, preferred it without the plug in the port. Once we take our attention off the bass port, you gotta concentrate. You gotta look at these by-wire binding posts. This is a radical upgrade over the S2 series binding posts. First of all, they're laid out horizontally, which makes more sense. It's more like the binding posts that are used in Bowers & Wilkins 700 and 800 series speakers. And they just feel great. They're just quality-wise and built, the whole thing way better than what came before. And I was so inspired by the look of these things. I said, I should really try by-wiring the 606 S3. So I did. Now, I admit it's my bad that I don't usually do that, so I can't say relative to other speakers that I've done. But in this case, going from a single wire connection to a by-wire connection with the same cables, it was definitely better in the by-wire configuration. The top end was a little sweeter, imaging was just a bit more spacious, which is connected to the high frequency response after all. It just did get better run by wire. Here are the specifications, pretty standard stuff. The impedance is rated at 8 ohms, but it does drop down to 3.7 ohms, which is below 4 ohms. So that means that anyone considering buying these speakers should make sure their amplifier has a 4 ohm spec. Whether it's a receiver, integrated power amplifier, make sure that it's there and can handle 4 ohms. And I will say no more about that regarding this speaker. As for placement, I found that they sounded best with some toe in, but not so much that they were firing directly at me. And the distance from the wall, well, I started with them about 13 inches away from the wall to the back of the speaker, with the bass ports in, the bass plugs in, the bass plugs out. It was fine. It was good. But then when I doubled that distance and I went to 26 inches away, more or less, from the wall to the back of the speaker, it just sounded like a better speaker, meaning just more spacious, less like a box, less like sound coming out of a box, just if you can. Now, I know that not everyone can have their speakers 26 inches away from the wall. I get it. But my job here is to just report what's going on. And it's not specific to this speaker. Most speakers, 95% of all speakers I've ever heard sound better further away from the wall. And this is definitely one of them. The other thing about the setup was the electronics I used. Now, I started with this Denon integrated amplifier, PMA600NE. Very nice, well, I wouldn't call it entry level, but near entry level integrated amplifier. Sounded good. But me being the audiophiliac, I decided, how can I make this better? So I used a better DAC, in this case, the Emotiva 3 XRD. Anyway, this Emotiva DAC, which is a $700 DAC, so it actually costs more than the integrated amplifier. And that definitely, and I'll be reviewing the Emotiva DAC shortly, so that was a step up. But then I said, I want to take this further, and I moved up to this new solid-state SHIT preamplifier. It's called the Cara, which I will be reviewing in the near future. And I teamed that with a SHIT Vidar 2 power amplifier. 100 watts channel into 8 ohms, 200 watts channel into 4. And that was definitely a big step up. And that's the electronics that I use with the Emotiva DAC, with the SHIT electronics, over the course of this review. My listening sessions commenced with a kind of a different course. That is, instead of starting with the 606 S3, I started with the 607 S2 anniversary speaker that I have around here as one of my references, and I listened to that. And the music was this CD that I referred to recently. It's called Motown Remixed. I think this came out in the 90s or the early 2000s. It's really, really good. And I'm playing this track with the Jackson 5 with a 12-year-old or so, Michael Jackson. The song is ABC. It's a great track, and that little speaker, 607S2, was pounding it out really, really nice. But, okay, so then I switched over to the 606 S3, and yeah, there was more bass, but it was really in the mid-range and treble that the difference was very apparent. That is, that Michael Jackson's voice, well, he sounded a couple of years older. You know, he had more chest to his voice, and the bass definition was better. The top end relaxed some. It was just a major shift in a really good direction. So from there, I went to this Ramones CD. Now, this is all cover tunes, no original Ramones songs on this record, but I love it. It's actually my favorite Ramones album. It just hits me a certain way that I really, really like. So anyway, I'm playing that, and I gotta say, Marky Ramone's drumming is just extraordinary. I mean, it's so fast and pounding. It's really, really exciting. And on this track, Substitute, which was written by Pete Townsend of The Who, Pete Townsend guests on that track, and he's singing background vocals. And again, I played this loud, because I love this CD so much. So I'm playing it over the 606 S3 at around 90 dB peaks. which is as loud as I ever really want to get for any extended period of time, meaning a song's length. And these speakers really held up. The clarity was there. This is not the best recording, but it was definitely tolerable. Played really loud. It wasn't like searing my eardrums or anything. So I was a very happy camper. But just, oh, one other thing, by the way, I did play, not at that moment, but I did play the 606 S3 quietly, meaning late night quiet, and it did, for a smallish stand mount speaker, a good job playing quietly. The next album was Acoustic Hot Tune It, which I believe is their first album. And it's a really good live recording. This is probably the late 60s or early 70s. It sounds really good. Jack and Jorma are into it. It's a blues record, an acoustic blues record. And I'm starting with the 606 S3, but then I switched over to the KEF LS50 Meta. And the first thing was that Jorma's vocals were not as developed, not as present. It's a little more further back. But Jack's bass, the bass clarity was better on the LS50 Meta. They were both really good, I would say, in terms of hearing into the mix, hearing the quieter parts of it, because this is a pretty dynamic recording. In other words, it's not like a wham bam recording, but it has contrast. I could hear deeper into it over the LS50 Meta. And also the imaging was really good for both speakers, of just getting out of the way and just letting the music fill my listening room. They both did an excellent job with that. I continued the LS50 606 comparison with this CD, which is the score for Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. What an amazing film. I love this movie. It really holds up. And it's beautiful looking. Yeah, a lot going on. But the score is a big wow factor. It is very dynamic, very powerful. It is orchestral music, but it's very intense. And the 606 did a great job giving me all of that, well, energy and drama and life to this music. And the LS50 took it down a notch or two. The highs were airier on the 606 than the KEF LS50 Meta. But they were both really, really good. But in terms of delivering that kind of power, yeah, I'd say that the 606 did a better job. As I cruised through my CD collection, I played some not so stellar recordings, and the ones that are bright or harsh or very compressed, edgy, sounded very compressed and edgy over the 606 S3. It's not a forgiving speaker. It's telling you what's in the recording. So it's not going to prettify the music. That it doesn't do. But, on the other hand, it is a warmish, full-sounding speaker, which does make a lot of recordings sound better because of that extra fullness. But if there's any nasties in the top end, yeah, you're going to hear those nasties in the top end. My last speaker comparison was the Klipsch RP600M Mark IIs. Now, these are horn speakers, obviously, and I wanted to play rock music, again, pretty loud through them, and compare that to the 606. And I played the Allman Brothers at the Fillmore East. It's a phenomenal recording for the time. And I got to say, both speakers did a really good job. But Duane and Dickey's electric guitars had more electric guitar energy through the Klipsch speakers. Those horn speakers just gave me more of that leading edge attack. And the 606 kind of took it down a bit. And again, feeling the energy of the rhythm section, yes, I would say that, again, the RP600M did a better job. But, you know, not by a huge amount, but that fullness that I was getting out of the 606 did make a physical impression on me of just sounding like, in that sense, a more powerful, bigger speaker. Now, by the way, unless your room is pretty big or you really crave a lot of bass, I can't imagine that most people that buy the 606 S3 would need to add a subwoofer for music. If you play home theater and you need the home theater special effects bass and all that, or EDM music, sure, you'll probably add a sub. But most people, I don't think you're going to need to add a subwoofer for these speakers, for music playback. So I want to finish up. Okay, let's finish this thing up with, so Steve, what do you really think of the Bowers & Wilkins 606 S3? You know, I think it's a very well-balanced design in terms of its build quality, its sound quality, the way it looks, the way it feels. It feels like a very substantial speaker. You know, there are these comparisons, the ones that I made, and of course many more that other people will make. But I came away thinking this speaker basically holds its own against some pretty strong contenders in its size and price class. So that's where we stand. Now, speaking of standing, yes, it's time for the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. Hey, incredibly enough, Alan sent in this picture 3 years ago, and I'm now just first seeing it. Wow. Anyway, I'm going to put up the address for you guys to send in pictures at the conclusion of this system of the day. Anyway, Alan's running Zoo Dirty Weekend Omen 2s. The amplification is an Elkit TU8600. That's a 300B amplifier, I think. Turntable, Riga RP6 with Groove Tracer mods and a Denon DL103R cartridge. Phonoprete is an iFi Zen. Streamer, Blue Sound Node 2i, and the DAC is a Dayton D90. Thank you, Alan. Okay, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg, and it's true. I am the Audiophiliac, and I am so glad you're here watching this video this far into the video, so thank you. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, I'd like you to consider contributing to my Patreon. You can do for just a couple of bucks a month up to the higher levels. You can do it for a couple of months and then bail. It's all good. It's all appreciated. So I'd like you to consider that. Please give likes to the videos that you like, thumbs up. Okay, and also I'd like you to consider subscribing to the channel, and when you do, please remember to hit the notification bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new episode. That's an optional. You don't have to do that, I'm just saying. And yeah, I think we're good. My work here is at last complete. Thank you again for watching, and I really, really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.